Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining me today. A beautiful Saturday in Austin, Texas. Sun's out. Going to be a good day today. My name is Alberto Casillas. I am a 41-year-old husband and father of 3. And I'm here to talk about how I successfully used keto and carnivore to reverse a lot of the symptoms I had with IBD, specifically ulcerative colitis. I've been a lifelong athlete. I am an admin in the Ketogenic Athlete in the Keto Manager's Kitchen. I'm a co-host at the Keto Man's Club podcast. We just celebrated our 1-year anniversary. By trade, full-time, I'm an automotive painter, which plays into the story because in hindsight, I firmly believe that the literal and physical toxicity of the job of painting cars and really, really bad reactions to sugar and grains are what manifested itself as ulcerative colitis inside me, and how I was able to kind of turn things around for myself. So that's why we're here. Talk about IBD, ulcerative colitis specifically, because that's what I suffered from. In very, very general terms, it's an autoimmune disease where your immune system makes a mistake inside you and it attacks your intestines, and it typically does not end well for anyone. There's no known cause, and for the most part, there's heavily relied on medications to manage your symptoms. No one ever talked to me about lifestyle. We'll get into that a little bit. And obviously it made a huge difference, as we'll talk about in a minute. But what's very important here, and this is coming from my perspective, is the symptoms. If you know anyone with any kind of IBD systems, any kind of gut issues, any kind of digestion issues, they may seem a little introverted. They may not be very social. And typically it's not because we don't want to be social. It's typically because we cannot predict what's going to happen inside of our stomachs. And it's just a lot easier to deal with in the comfort of your own home, knowing where the nearest bathroom is, as opposed to being out and about and having to hunt something down at the last minute. My symptoms at their worst, diarrhea is an understatement. Severe urgency, and by severe urgency, I mean I could be sitting here holding a conversation, talking to you guys like I am now, and when the urge hits, I have probably 45 to 60 seconds to find a bathroom. Otherwise, you're having an accident, and you have absolutely zero control over it whatsoever. Passing blood. It's gross. It's not talked about. It's scary. It happens. That's when things are not going well at all. It is unfortunately not unusual for us IBD sufferers, but that's where the medications come in, and any other thing you can do to try to control it, because once it gets to that point, nothing good comes of that. Anemia, I suffered from anemia, exhaustion, malnutrition. I was severely underweight for about a year of my life. I was really, really skinny. My skin had this weird green hue to the point where everybody would just ask me if I was okay, but you know, me being me, and like, oh, everything's fine. It's just I'm green today, that kind of thing. So for this talk, moving forward, when I say gut issues, for me personally, it's just going to refer to diarrhea. So if I'm talking about some of my experiences and I said gut issues, it's not all the bad stuff I just talked about. It's just some diarrhea. So what officially qualifies me to talk about this? Pretty much nothing, other than my own personal story. The only thing I am officially qualified to talk about professionally with authority is painting cars. And obviously we're not dealing with that here. But I was able to stick with keto long enough and stay strict enough to get some pretty amazing results that even baffled everyone I know, and including my doctors. So that's where kind of painting cars kind of ties in, because like I travel around the country. I've painted cars in Puerto Rico, all over the United States. And basically, they rely on me to come out with a single outcome and manipulate all these variables for the outcome being the perfect paint job, which is very hard to do. So for me in my head, I was like, okay, well, if I've mastered this, is there a way to tie this into manipulating variables for a single outcome when it came to my personal health? And the way we do that in the car painting world is you standardize and SOP everything. Everything has a standardization, everything has an SOP. And you stick to the rules and you adjust when you need to. And it's never failed me. I've always come out with a great outcome that I've had a really good career with. So I tried to use those same principles with my personal health, sticking very, very strict with keto and carnivore. And came out with a very, very good outcome for me. So I was diagnosed in my late teens, early 20s. Ironically, looking back is when I started painting cars that all this manifested. So now it's not a surprise. It was then. When you're at a very young age, supposedly in the prime of your life, and you find out your body is broken and something's not working the way it's supposed to, it is an incredibly traumatic experience. It plays games with your mind, and everyone around you is perfectly fine. All your friends are going out and having fun and, you know, going to the bars. And in the meantime, you're ignoring the fact that something inside of you is broken and not working properly. I specifically recall the first time I went to the doctor when I realized something was wrong, and the doctor explained nothing to me. And so I had no idea what was going on. And, you know, there's only one way to test if there's blood in your stool, and it's exactly how you imagine. And I just recall leaving that doctor's office and going home and hopping straight in the shower, because I knew in the shower, no one would be able to tell I was crying because I was standing in the shower. But nothing was ever explained to me. And looking back, he was a pretty bad doctor. He didn't sit down. It was kind of like in and out, and then carry on your way. Here's this bottle of pills. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Let me know how it goes. And so you're dealing with all that at 19 years old, and being afraid to talk to anyone, which is another mistake. I was embarrassed. I mean, how could you not be? So I kept everything to myself. Just recently, you know, I was talking to my mom about it, and she was actually shocked at how bad my symptoms had gotten. And, you know, she felt bad. She said, well, I never knew. And I responded to her, I was like, well, how would you know if I never told you? And that's how a lot of us deal with it. And it's not unusual for someone to keep a secret because it's incredibly embarrassing, as you can imagine. So in my 20s, I dealt with it. I dealt with it the way a 20-year-old did. I ignored it, and I went out and I partied, and I drank all the beer and went out to all the restaurants and ate all the junk food. And I just figured, you know what, I'm going to ignore it and just live my life and deal with the consequences later. And ignoring it versus addressing it is never a good thing. But at the time of my life, I just wanted to be normal. And, you know, I didn't know what normal was, but I knew what my friends were doing, and I wanted to do that. And I wanted to be like them. And I did deal with the consequences the day after day after day. And, you know, when you're living like that, it doesn't usually end well. And it didn't, but I just kind of suffered through. I wasn't in the right headspace, you know, and in my head, I just wanted to go about my life and carry on like I normally did. And I can tell you from personal experience, when you're that stubborn, and I'm going to use the word ignorant in terms of myself, when you're that stubborn and ignorant, it will catch up with you, and it will not be good. And that's pretty much kind of how I rode out my entire 20s. Working, training at the time was martial arts and weightlifting, and then just going out with my buddies and hanging out. And in my head, I would, you know, justify it to myself saying, okay, well, I'm working at work 40 to 50 hours a week. I'm going to martial arts 5 to 6 hours a week. I'm weightlifting at the time, you know, another 5 hours a week, but sick people don't do that. If I was sick, I couldn't. Meanwhile, my insides were wrecked. But in my head, I'm doing fine. If I can do all this, that's not what sick people do. Sick people stay at home. Sick people sit in bed all day. I'm getting up for work every day. I'm going to martial arts every day. I'm doing my weightlifting every day. And it was pure stubbornness that got me through. And definitely not the healthiest coping mechanism, but like I said, in my 20s, being extremely stubborn, and that's kind of how we went around it. So enter my 30s. Me and my wife decided we're going to start taking health seriously. We want to start a family. So we started trying to clean up our diet in your average standard American diet method. And it worked. I mean, you know, when you cut out a lot of the partying and a lot of the junk food and the fast food, and you just start eating quote unquote cleaner, the medications actually have a chance to do what they're supposed to do. And I actually had pretty good results with that. You know, I still continue to go to my doctor. Doctors were happy with my progress, taking my health a little more seriously. You know, lost a little bit of weight, you know, getting color in my skin again, starting to look like, not like a skeleton. And at the time, I was also presented with an opportunity to transition from painting cars full time to the service side, where I would be supporting painters and doing more of the training. So stepping out of the physical toxicity. And then just to kind of explain it real quick, like when I paint cars, even now when I paint cars, I have about a 10-pound breathing apparatus that's battery powered, charcoal filtered, goes to a helmet that I'm wearing over my head. I'm wearing a full paint suit above my clothes. I have gloves on that are taped to my paint suit, and the paint suit is taped to my boots. So I am isolating myself as much as possible from what's around me, because that's how dangerous this stuff is. So getting out of that definitely helped tremendously. So between the changing of the diet and being able to transition to the training side of things, my diet improved a lot, my health improved quite a bit. And this was all prior to keto. Things were kind of on the up and up, but this was a result of me finally taking ownership of my health and personally, just knowing what I had to do and getting in the right headspace to just say, you know what, enough is enough. At 20 to 30 years old, I couldn't live life like that. You start getting dark thoughts and when you're having real bad days and you got to like force yourself to get out of bed, and that's no way to live life. So this in my 30s was definitely a step in the right direction. And right around there is where I stumbled across keto. And by this time, I had lived in 4 states, many different doctors in 4 states. I was considered healthy, constantly gaining weight, not much, but constantly gaining weight. I never breached 200 pounds, but at 5'8" and 195 pounds, it's heavy. Any way you cut it, it's pretty heavy. And considering the amount of training I was doing, it's extremely heavy. And I just for the life of me, there was no chance of it coming off. And then every time I go to the doctor, just a couple more pounds, just a couple more pounds, just a couple more pounds. I lived in 4 different states, multiple doctors. I was considered healthy by their definitions, even though I did not feel like an athlete. I didn't look like an athlete. And no matter what I did, I simply could not stop gaining weight. But according to them, I was the poster boy for success. I was sticking to the plan. I was eating as clean as possible. And I was in remission, which is the goal, through medication. And so every doctor's office I'd go in, be a pat on the back, it'd be, yeah, don't worry about your weight. It'll be fine. You're getting older, you can't stay skinny forever, that kind of thing. So ended up stumbling across keto through a random work encounter. And I don't feel it was random, because a lot of things had to go right in order for me to stumble across keto the way I did and bump into the people I did at the time I did in order to make all these drastic changes. So, I mean, it was basically, hey, yeah, I eat keto and this and that, you should try it. It's high fat, this and that. And in my head, like, that's never going to work. I got gut issues. High fat's not for me. There's no way it's going to fly. And I'm like, well, you know what? I'll go home and research it. What do I got to lose, right? I got nothing to lose. So went home, did just a tiny bit of research, and I got no further than, high-fat ketogenic diet has been shown to have improvements on digestion issues. And at that moment, I stopped and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give this an 8-week trial. It's probably not going to work. What do I got to lose? It's only 8 weeks. Let's just kind of go for it and see what happens. So I did a bunch of reading, found the approved foods list, and kind of just went about it very, very simply, and just started researching day by day and kind of slowly tweaking things little by little. And the first thing I noticed is within days, there was an improvement. First of all, with joint and back pain. I was having really bad back pain problems. Part of the reason why I wanted to get out of painting, knee pain and back pain. It's a very active job. You're constantly getting up and down. You're working on concrete. I noticed that was improved almost immediately. My urgency to find a bathroom decreased significantly. And it's an interesting thing when you have IBD, you'll anywhere you go new, the very first thing we do is scope out the scenario and find exactly where the bathrooms are, so we're going to need them. It's almost a guarantee we're going to need them. And it was one of the first things I noticed. I'd walk into a store and it wouldn't even cross my mind. Like, I would just start doing what I got to do, and it wasn't immediately kind of looking around like, where's the sign? All right, there's the bathroom. I'm probably going to need it eventually. So that was once that realization came through, it was actually quite, for me, it was pretty astounding. And I was like, all right, well, this is only at this time, I think, a week and a half in. So we're going to keep going with this. And everything slowly got better. Every day by day, everything got better. I got to the point where I was taking my meds every other day and still feeling fine. And then I specifically recall the day where I was getting ready to go to work, and I go to reach and grab my keys, and I go to walk out, and I'm like, oh man, I didn't take my medicine today. So I run up to the cabinet, reach into the cabinet, grab my medicine, and it dawns on me I hadn't taken my medicine in 2 weeks. Like, I had simply forgot to take my medication. And that's obviously never advised when you're allegedly on lifelong medications. And I kind of had a panic attack there, because I was just like, oh, I forgot to take my medication. And like, immediately in my head, all my health went south in that 1 second. And, I kind of took a step back and thought about it. And I was like, but I feel great. Like, everything is great. Like, I feel great. I got more energy. I'm sleeping great. Everything's normal in the digestion department. I remember looking at my wife and telling her, like, I haven't taken these pills in 2 weeks. And she was kind of blown away by it. So I actually put them back in the cabinet. I said, we're going to ride this out. Like, I know what it feels like to be sick. I know my body. If things start to go south, I'll get right back on the medications, but we'll just kind of ride this out and we'll see where it goes. And maybe I'll get 2-3 weeks out of this. I'll brag about that and we'll just carry on. So, needless to say, that was 755 days ago and counting, because I do count. I got a counter on my phone. So that's just over 2 years med-free, when I was pretty much told my entire adult life that medication was going to be a way of life and that was never going to change. So around this time, I had told my doctors that I just stopped eating sugar and I was cooking most of my own food. And they were just like, okay, that's a pretty good idea. And then now I knew I had a colonoscopy coming up. And by this time I was feeling pretty confident. So I decided, I call it the break myself story. I decided if we're going to break this thing, we're going to break this thing. I knew I had an appointment coming up. I knew I had labs coming up. I knew I had a scope coming up. So 6 months before that, I decided to do strict red meat, Sean Baker style carnivore. Nothing but red meat, a little bit of chicken, a little bit of pork, water, and coffee. Thinking, if this ends badly, at least it ended badly. But if I'm going to force this issue and it comes out good, even better. So I specifically recall going to the doctor and having the appointment and telling him that I stopped taking my medications, which was probably the only time the guy has ever decided to stop typing and look at me, which that made for an interesting conversation. He was not happy with my choice and immediately decided that we had to get this scope pushed up and done faster. So I was all for it. Long story short there, I had my procedure. The procedure ended. I was waiting for the results. And it turns out that every last bit of inflammation inside my intestines was not only reversed, but there was no signs of it at all. It had completely gone away. And it kind of blew him away because he knew at that time what I was eating. And he didn't believe it and really had no words, but you really couldn't argue with the results. And like that for me, was my little mic drop moment. For something that's, you've never been told about food. You've only been told about medications and how to best manage this and how to get around your life. For me to be able to suffer from this for, at the time, about half my adult life, and then have an appointment and a procedure that qualified everything I was feeling, was extremely gratifying. And I mean, I couldn't ask for a better outcome. And ever since then, things have just been getting better and better and better. And that's kind of where my story is up to today. And on usually these type of things, you have a crowd and you have questions and answers. So what I decided to do was to do a little Q&A of the most frequently asked questions I get. And I just broke them down to a few because I could talk forever. None of us need that. So I get asked all the time, like, what is my style of keto? And if you're in the space long enough, there's many different ways to go about it. Some I approve of, some I don't. But the way I lovingly refer to it is I am a high-fat, butter-chugging ketoer. The higher my fat, the better. I do really, really well with it. And I've heard anecdotally through different podcasts and stuff that there is a correlation between high animal fat and gut health. And from my personal experience, there's definitely something there. Every once in a while, I should say every once in a while. Once I decided to try lower fat strictly for body composition reasons, for my own personal vanity. And I'm not going to say it worked, but I didn't feel great. I didn't feel bad, but I didn't feel great. So at that point, I decided, you know what, there's certain things I'm going to sacrifice and there's certain things I'm not. Like, I'm going to stick to the high fat if that means I only get down to X percentage body fat, but I'm happy. I'm going to pick my battles and I'm going to stick with that one. I also believe ingredients matter, and ingredients matter a lot. I don't try to sneak anything in. I don't, try to sneak stuff in for carbs. I count total carbs because there's less loopholes that way. And that just seems to work for me. Stick to the approved foods list and go with it. And a lot of people ask, like, where I get my macros from. The easiest answer for that is Keto Savage has a great macro calculator. He's also very high fat. I've used his macros when attempting to bulk and attempting to cut. I had great success with them. And as he states, so it's not like it's a big surprise, it works well and you feel great the whole time. So I have no reason to steer away from that. And that's probably where I recommend people the most when they're asking about macros. Notable improvements that I've personally experienced, like I stated earlier, I look and feel like an athlete. I'm now 5'8", 180 pounds. I was 195 when I started. I'm 41 years old. I effortlessly maintain a low body fat percentage year round, and I manipulate that to my pleasing, just depending on how much I feel like eating. I can deadlift 2.5 times my body weight with no wraps, no straps, no belt, nothing, which if you're in the weightlifting scene, that's actually something to brag about. I'm trying to get it higher, but at the same time, I know for my frame, I'm pretty much at the upper limit of what I'm gonna be able to deadlift without hurting myself or assistance gear. So I'm proceeding with caution. I've gone on I've had buddies call me and be like, hey, we're gonna go climb a mountain next week. You want to go? And doesn't sound like much, but when you have a past like mine, the first thing that comes into your head is, okay, how many stops are on the way? Are we gonna stop at gas stations? Or we're up this mountain. There are gonna be bathrooms on the way there, this and that. But like those thoughts gone. We went for it. 10-hour hike up and down this mountain. Pretty much had nothing but a fat coffee in the morning, and I was outpacing all these guys that I went with where they stopped for breaks. I ran a half marathon on 2 weeks notice, which I do not recommend anyone does. It was an experience, but it was a good experience now that it's over. But long story short there, I've always been interested in a long distance run, but I was never going to pay for a marathon because they're expensive. And I accidentally won an entry into the Austin Marathon. And I could either choose a 5K, which I've done, a half marathon, or a full marathon. And I definitely was not going to do the full marathon because I'm not that crazy. But I opted to do the half marathon on 2 weeks notice. Pretty much stopped weightlifting for that 2 weeks and then trained. And long story short, I completed a half marathon in 2 hours and 40 minutes with pretty much no formal running training. And the day after was, as you can imagine, not extremely pleasant. But I did it. And it was just one of those things where I had it in my head, like, you may never have this chance again. I know I'm not going to pay for it. And I'm all about pushing my physical limits now because I've never been able to. So to me, it's freeing, it's gratifying. Other question I usually get asked is, if I was to sit down in a room full of younger people that were recently diagnosed, what kind of advice would I have? And this one, I mean, going back to what I went through, I wish there was support groups available. I wish somebody would. I'm sure there was physical support groups available, not just online, but if there was, no one told me about them. But my advice to anyone who's recently diagnosed is do all your research. Research any and all diets, research your disease, research your symptoms, talk to your doctor, ask them for advice. I kept a lot of stuff away from my doctor because a few years ago, keto wasn't as popular and I was having hard enough conversations with them, and I just didn't want to make it any more complicated. And things are turning a little bit now, and I'm actually doctor shopping for a new doctor, and I have a few leads that I'm pretty confident that the conversations will go a lot better. Ask all the questions. I mean, your doctor's there for you. I know they try to rush you in and out, and it's not always the most pleasant place to have a conversation, because it's just, to me, every time I went, it's always like the nurse comes in, asks you a handful of questions, leaves, doctor comes in, asks you the exact same questions, pats you on the back or adjusts something, and you leave. But I mean, they're there for you. Force them to talk to you, make sure you're completely comfortable by the time you leave. There's no better place than there. You got to get over that awkward hump. In this space, I'm not going to list them all, but there are tons of podcasts. Every podcast left and right about low carb and the lifestyle. Listen to them all. You have nothing to lose. Same goes for books. Same goes for Facebook groups now. Keto Evangelist has a bunch of great Facebook groups that I'm a part of. The Keto Man's Club is a great Facebook group if you happen to be a man. There's tidbits of information out there everywhere. I mean, if you just take a tidbit here, a tidbit there from every podcast, every book, every Facebook comment or post, they're going to add up, and you can tailor what you've learned and pick and choose to what's going to work for you. And another thing I always tell people is, like, there's no guaranteed results. I consider myself maybe an outlier. Like, I don't think this disease has a lot of progression, and it can be really bad for some people. And I'm not going to be the one to say that this is going to be the answer for everyone. But if you look at it from the sense that if it can improve your suffering 15 to 20%, and all you're doing is changing the food you're eating, what do you got to lose? It can be that simple. For me personally, it literally changed my life, and everything was right in front of me. I just never knew it. And then definitely read and understand all the medications you're on and all the side effects of those medications, because sometimes you get on a medication that's supposed to help you, and you get this wild side effect that comes off the wall that you were not expecting, and you think the sky's falling, And it turns out it's normal for you to sweat through 3 or 4 towels at night, and it's normal for your pee to glow yellow. And it can get scary, it can get sketchy, but definitely ask all the questions, read all your side effects and understand them. Another question I get asked a lot is about social gatherings and how I handle social gatherings. I travel a lot for work, which means there's a lot of work functions. And when I'm out of town, you eat out because that's all there is. And my answer to that is always, you know what, locations change and keto doesn't. Wherever you end up, there's someone doing keto successfully there, and there's chances are there's a grocery store. So that there's really no excuse. I don't think there's an excuse for being at an airport. I don't think there's an excuse for being stuck at a hotel. There's options everywhere. You just got to do a little bit of research and look. Scope out your scene. You know, if you know you're going out to dinner for a work function, everyone's got menus available online. Know what you're going to order before you go ahead of time. You can scope it out. You can, by the time you sit down, you can just be part of the conversation instead of studying the menu and trying to figure out what you're going to leave out. You know, restaurants don't care anymore. It's a lot easier now than it was 3 years ago. You know, 3 years ago, you'd tell them you didn't want one on your hamburger, and they'd look at you like you were crazy. And now it's that most places even offer it that way. And then honestly, no thanks, I'm good, has gone a very long way. Someone offers me I don't want to eat. And one thing that people are very surprised about is, other than my immediate family, I never told anyone I was eating keto. Didn't tell any friends. I didn't know if I was going to stick with it, and I didn't want to be that guy. And the interesting thing is, it took 2 years before somebody finally picked up on it. Before one of my guys that I worked with just so happened to, like, we were out at lunch, and he's like, he just asked, like, do you eat keto? And I was like, yeah. He's like, how long? And he's like, 2 years. And he was all surprised. But at that point, it was really interesting because the results were there. Like I was friends with this guy before I started. So he saw the transformation and the results were there. And at that point, it doesn't become that awkward conversation of how is this healthy and how is this not? Because he literally approached me from a place of intrigue and curiosity. It made it go a lot easier. So, like, with the results there, it makes that conversation go a lot better. Next question I get asked a lot is alcohol. Do I drink? Can I drink? Can I? Yes. Do I? Not really. It's not for me. I don't enjoy the sluggish feeling I get the day after I drink, if I choose to drink. My family has got a history of alcoholic tendencies, and addictive personalities is a thing I am very, very familiar with. And I just choose to focus on fitness and doing all kinds of random physical activities and addict myself to that as opposed to anything else. And do I work out a lot? Yes, I work out a lot. But if I want to be addicted to something, there are definitely worse things to be addicted to. And you'd be hard pressed to find optimal health and alcohol in the same sentence. And especially if you're suffering from IBD, there's just some things that, you know what, there's just some things that aren't worth it. And, you know, focus on getting healthy. And if you can, at that time you get healthy, you can enjoy a cocktail or two, then by all means rock on. But as you're repairing yourself, I would avoid it at all costs. Signs of accidental ingestion of something you don't want to eat, in our case is sugars or bad oils. I personally don't cheat. It's just not worth it to me. I know what it feels like to be sick. I ain't going back there. Interesting story is, when my 8-week trial was over, way back in the day, I went on a pizza and beer binge because my 8 weeks was over, and I figured, what's the worst that could happen? Well, the worst that could happen was I gained 4 pounds in a matter of days, and my gut issues started coming back. So that ended rather quickly. But even since then, if I eat something that even has a little bit of a sugar or bad oil that might be hidden in there, my stomach will usually tell me within 10 minutes. Nothing bad, but I'll know. And then this one's interesting because I can almost time it. I get a lower backache. It creeps up my spine to the back of my shoulders, then immediately jumps to my knees, then immediately jumps to my knuckles. It's the strangest thing. It almost feels like everything has to crack, but won't crack. And that's how I know, like, if I ate a meal that had something hidden in it that shouldn't have been in there, that's usually how I can gauge that. But that's as bad as it gets, as long as I go back to what I'm doing, or, you know, 99% of the time I'm eating my own food anyway, so it's a very rare occurrence. And the gut issues obviously return. Next question I usually get is food quality. You know, grass-fed, organic versus grocery store. I'm a very simple person. I buy store brand everything. Everything I get store brand. If I can find it on sale, I buy it on sale. I recently found a local private rancher up here in Central Texas, so it's not hard to come across. And I take advantage of that whenever I can. He'll give me a call whenever he slaughters, and I'll gladly take advantage of that. But other than that, regular grocery store stuff, nothing crazy. And last but not least, from my perspective, what's the easiest way to start keto? And this one gets tricky because with IBD, food in general is like throwing a monkey wrench in the gears and nothing ever goes smooth. You're going to love this because my usual first piece of advice is go to ketoevangelist.com and get their approved foods list, because that is hands down the best food list I've ever found anywhere, and I recommend it to everyone. Second thing is, if you pick up a magazine that says lose 30 pounds in 30 days with keto, whatever advice they give you is probably not going to work for the average healthy person to get started. It will work, but it's definitely not going to work for IBD sufferers. Anyone can tell you that even the most healthy person, if you change diets overnight, there's going to be a reaction in your gut. And a healthy person can ride it out and be back normal in a few days. Us with IBD, typically it'll put us off, because like the last thing you want is for things to get worse. And that's where you hear the stories, well, keto didn't work for me. I started keto tomorrow and ate a pound of bacon and a stick of butter and I got sick. And well, that kind of makes sense. So you got to taper in. You got to taper in. And my advice there is don't change a thing for the first 3 days. Just start tracking. Start tracking your food, start reading labels. Know what the ketogenic macros are with high fat. Eat how you normally eat, and then just make a comparison and look at that pie graph versus what a ketogenic pie graph is supposed to look like, and look at the vast differences in how you're eating now and how you could be eating if you were eating keto. And if that doesn't tell a story and make you want to at least give it a shot, that it's usually enough to get people going. Track everything you eat. Keep a food journal. You need to be able to identify triggers, foods that are going to set you off. And the only way to do that is documentation. The more food you can eliminate that set you off, the better. And again, you got to try to find what's safe for you to eat. And as long as you can stick to your safe foods for a while, your metabolism will start healing itself, and that list will constantly change. I took a blood allergy test. My second highest allergen was eggs. And now I eat 8 to 10 eggs a day sometimes. I've been eating eggs every day for the last 5 to 6 years. But according to this blood allergy test at the time, when I was sick, I was severely allergic to eggs. So those things can change. It's good to know the information, but know they change, they evolve as you repair yourself. Start reading all the labels of everything you have in your house. Every last little thing. Think about when you first got your first smartphone. You have no idea how to use it, but the longer you poke around at it, the more it makes sense. Same goes for reading labels. Just start reading them. You don't got to understand everything. Just nutritional information, labels, read it all. And if you have IBD, taper in very, very slowly. The slower, the better. And what I usually suggest to people is don't do the pantry raid. Don't go through there and start throwing stuff out. I say finish it off and just don't replace it. Just therefore taking that taper and making it last even longer. And, as you burn through the bad foods, just don't replace them. Replace them with something that is ketogenic. And that way you can get that taper to last even longer. You'll have even better results. Because as I said a second ago, what you don't want to do is switch overnight and have things go south and then blame the diet. Avoid all sweeteners. They have their place. They're not necessarily bad for everyone, but when you're trying to heal your metabolism and you have gut issues, they're not doing you any favors. I think that's pretty well documented. Keep your meals as simple as possible. I personally, at this point, slab of meat, some greens with some butter, and that pretty much covers it for 3 meals a day. You can get as extravagant as you want. I'm capable of making some very extravagant foods. I just pretty much choose not to. I just keep everything very simple. And my most favorite and last one is steaks over shakes. And what do I mean by steaks over shakes? In any given scenario, food's going to win every time over a supplement. And with IBD, red meat is a touchy subject because it can be really hard for people to digest, literally. But you can get there. And I think the goal is to get there. So depending on what shape you're in, you might be able to only handle boiled chicken, because depending on what condition your guts are in. And if that's the case, stick with what you can handle. Don't go by the recommended guide. Go with what you know and slowly work from there. And eventually you'll realize as you start healing yourself that the amount of food you can tolerate is growing and growing and growing and growing. And before you know it, you'll be able to handle almost any protein and almost any source of fat and any keto approved veggies and not have any problems. But I've seen advice where someone with having real bad symptoms, and they just say, well, you should just be eating more red meat. And the person said, well, I can't tolerate red meat. They're like, well, but you should just eat more of it. I'm like, okay, well, if you can't tolerate it, don't eat it. It's quite that simple. Just because this magazine article says eat more red meat, that doesn't apply to us. Eat what you can tolerate and slowly taper in. So that's all I got for today. I tried to squeeze a lot of info in, hopefully not too much. Hopefully it wasn't too boring. I'm sure you guys got a lot of presentations you're going through, and I really appreciate your time and taking the time to listen. Hopefully it was helpful to some of you. I can be reached on Facebook as Alberto. It's a long joke that I'll tell you in person one day, and that stands for The Berto. I'm in the Ketogenic Athlete, the Keto Evangelist Kitchen, Ketogenic Success, the Keto Man's Club on Facebook, or you can reach me on Instagram at l.ketocholo. And again, thank you for your time.